Father, I ask now that the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts would be acceptable in your sight. You alone are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. Act like you've been there before. That was something that I heard, read, marked, learned, inwardly digested. As a child, act like you've been there before. Of course, that was from the great theologian Vince Lombardi. While he was coaching the Green Bay Packers, he would tell his players, when you score a touchdown, just hand the football to the ref. Don't celebrate, don't do a dance, act like you've been there before. Has to do with humility and decorum, handling success well, having a quiet confidence, keeping your emotions in check, having some basic class. Act like you've been there before. This morning, we are going to be looking in the Gospel of Matthew. We've been here for several weeks, but we're going to be in Matthew chapter 15. And in this particular passage, Jesus and the disciples actually find themselves somewhere they've never been before. And it's a completely unlikely encounter. They meet this woman, this Canaanite woman. She's never been here before, and they're actually frustrated with the way that she is acting. And so we're going to look carefully at this interaction between Jesus and the Canaanite woman. Even here, Jesus doesn't seem to do what we would think he would do or say. There's actually been a lot of ink spilled. They would say, well, here, actually, Jesus is either exhibiting racism or chauvinism or indifference. I don't think that's what's happening, but let's take a close look at this passage this morning. The first thing we're going to see with this encounter is that Jesus seems first to ignore this woman. Then it seems like he insults her in the red letters, and then he's going to exalt her. And we see what this has all been about the whole time. So first, let's set this up. This encounter with the Canaanite woman in Matthew 15. There are Bibles. They're in the pew rack if you'd like to follow along. We're going to start in verse 21 of this chapter. You'll read verse 21. It says, Jesus went away from there and withdrew to the district of Tyre and Sidon. So we've got this transition moment in chapter 15. Up until this point, all of this chapter has been a debate. Jesus has been arguing with the religious leaders, the scribes and the Pharisees. They're arguing about ritual. They're arguing about tradition. They're arguing about what makes someone clean and what it means to be unclean. And then we get this encounter really as an applied illustration on that discussion they've just had. It's interesting. Pressure is mounting. There's negativity towards Jesus. And I think it's interesting it says that he went away from there. He withdrew. Jesus is pulling back a little bit. He's getting out of the pressure cooker, out of the line of fire. He actually goes where you would never expect the Messiah to go. He goes to Tyre and Sidon. I don't know what alarm bells go off in your mind when you hear that. There was a region north of Israel on the Mediterranean Sea. They had two big port cities, Tyre and Sidon. They made up this region. These are beach towns. These are resort cities. It's in what is now Lebanon. And the other thing is that throughout the Bible, Tyre and Sidon are mentioned. They're usually code for about the most spiritually bankrupt person you could be. So you read the prophet Isaiah. I wish I had the confidence to say Isaiah. I love it. But the prophet Isaiah, and he talks about Tyre and Sidon as these places of cursing. These icons of unbelief. There's a part earlier in the Gospels where Jesus he's in the Galilee region. People are rejecting his message and his ministry, and he uses these as a foil. He's like, if I did this in Tyre and Sidon, they would actually respond well with faith. He does that to actually let them know how poorly they are doing. These regions are so notorious that Jesus could hold them up as a hypothetical counter lesson for how to properly respond to him and his message. There's a New Testament scholar named Dale Bruner. It says Tyre and Sidon, where Jesus now goes, those are code names in the Bible for pagan land. The first century Jewish historian Josephus wrote, the people of Tyre are our bitterest enemies. That's where Jesus goes for a little R&R. These are the most wicked, in their minds, spiritually, morally bankrupt people you could think of. And he makes a beeline for that place for this applied lesson on what makes a person clean, and what actually it means to be unclean. And as we would say, we're not in Kansas anymore. He's having this R&R, maybe some beach time, and we're told that a woman approaches. It says, verse 22, and behold, can you believe it? A Canaanite woman from that region came out and was crying out to him. Some places you might hear this woman called the Syro-Phoenician woman, Syria, Phoenicia, that kind of region. But she comes and she is crying out. It's worth noting that actually the word translated crying out, this Greek word, it almost always doesn't just mean that she's loud. It means that she's too loud. You all probably know some people like that. They're always a little too loud. They're always a little too much. They're always a little too extra. They don't act like they've been there before. They don't get the social cues and the rules. And this woman comes screaming for help to Jesus. Think about all the strikes she has against her here in the first century in Matthew 15. First, she is a she. And a woman wouldn't naturally approach a rabbi. It just wasn't done, wasn't proper. Secondly, she's a pagan. And third, her behavior is uncouth. 3 strikes, okay? She might have 3 strikes, but this is Jesus. I mean, we have our assumptions of how Jesus will respond, what he will say. And he actually, she comes boldly. She's asking for mercy and healing. If you look, she doesn't have anything physically wrong, but her daughter is oppressed by a demon. And I'll tell you, in all of my experience in just life and ministry, if there is a mother and her child is in danger, screw the cultural convention, she's going to go get the help she needs. And that's what she does right here. She goes to the one who can help and does anything and everything she can to get his attention. She is there, by the way, this icon of pagan land, set up intentionally in stark contrast to the leaders who, again, have been rejecting Jesus and his message, while this woman seems on point. Her theology, somehow in pagan land, crystal clear. Oh Lord, Son of David. She knows who he is. She believes in what he can do. She gets it. And again, this is an indictment on those who don't get it. Both the religious leaders there, and we're going to see, what about his disciples? Do they understand what he's about? Do they understand these debates he's been having, the controversy being stirred up? Do they understand these miracles? Do they understand the work that Christ has for them to do? There's this showdown here, this moment of tension as this woman comes crying out. There's a church father from the 6th century named Epiphanius. He looks at this and just says, oh, great mystery. The Lord came out from the Jews. He went north. And this woman came out from her Gentile territory. It's this meeting in the middle. He left the Jews behind, and the woman left behind idolatry and an impious lifestyle. What they had lost, she found. The one whom they had denied in the law She professed through her faith. This woman is the mother of the Gentiles, and she knew Christ through faith. She comes crying out, and then there's a pause. Pregnant pause, silent pause. I said you could say this is Jesus ignoring her. I think Jesus is actually waiting to see if his disciples will step forward in faith, will step forward correctly. Have they actually figured out what his mission is? Do they understand this new hospitality on offer? How will they respond? Again, the last part of the chapter was all about what defiles a person. Jesus has been dismantling this system of external self-righteous holiness. He's been calling for a renovation of the heart, for an expansion of hospitality and mission. Here's where the rubber meets the road for the disciples. So he doesn't say anything to see how they're going to respond. Well, not great. The disciples here are dismissive. Send her away, for she is crying out after us. Dale Bruner again says that their desire here is their own peace. They're annoyed. She's bothering them. What the woman is screaming, that her daughter is in trouble, is lost in their offense that she is screaming at all. They're like, pipe down. Act like you have some class. Act like you've been here before. There's rules to all this. That's what the disciples are doing. You see, throughout the Gospel of Matthew, the disciples, God bless them, they assume that they know who Jesus has time for and who he doesn't. They assume that they know who Jesus will welcome and who he won't. They assume that they know what Jesus is up to and what he is not up to. So they say, send her away. Unfortunately, that's their impulse often. But when we had a few weeks ago the feeding of the 5,000 plus, the 5,000 men plus women and children, you remember that? They have this day of ministry. They have these people in need. The disciples come to Jesus, send them away to get some food. He says, you give them something to eat. And then we have this miracle. A few chapters later, Matthew chapter 19, there are these parents. They're bringing their children to Jesus. Wonderful, beautiful, loud, crying out too loudly children to Jesus to pray and bless them. And the disciples say, hey, leave Jesus alone. He doesn't have time for you. He doesn't have time for your kids. And Jesus says, shh, no, let the little children come to me. Anytime there's a crisis, anytime the disciples are annoyed, anything that intrudes on what they want to do, send it away. Send them away, send her away, send the kids away. And every time they say send them away, Jesus is saying bring them here. I want to welcome them. I want to feed them. I want to talk with them. I want to pray for them. I want to bless them. And so here, it's interesting. He's going to actually set this moment up to both respond well to this Canaanite woman, and he's trying to teach them. He's trying to show them the kind of work that he has for them to do. And again, Jesus' words here at first sound harsh. It even sounds like maybe he's doing what they've said to send her away, but use your ears and your eyes in this passage. Because what you hear might not match what you see. When it sounds like he's doing what they say, this woman goes nowhere. She's locked in. She knows and is responding to Jesus in this scene. And so we get this next section where after Jesus has seemingly ignored her, they're going to have a conversation. This is where maybe the insult occurs, but stick with it. Here's what Jesus finally says. I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. The disciples are like, good. He's finally got some sense. He's figured it out. Maybe we're not going to be in trouble. Maybe the scribes and the religious leaders will accept us once again. We can all just get along. In a sense, he's right. there's a sequence and a priority to the ministry of Jesus. Bishop N.T. Wright says Jesus wasn't simply a traveling doctor whose task was to heal every sick person he met. He had a very specific calling. The issue here is sequence, not superiority. He's come in fulfillment of all the promises of the Old Testament to be Israel's Messiah, to have this very focused work that will culminate in his death and resurrection. And then we see that mission overflow and spill out like the feeding of the 5,000 plus and the 4,000 plus to all the nations. But this seems to be jumping the gun here in pagan land. And so again, I think he's teaching and testing his disciples. In some ways, they've been kind of a buffer between him and this woman. And so then now somehow we find the woman and Jesus face to face. She's kneeling down. I don't know if he went to her through the disciples or if she made his way to him, but look at this encounter. She comes and she kneels before the Lord. Her response is brave, humble, and to the point. She doesn't actually say, check your theology, Jesus. She's very simple, Lord, help me. And his answer, it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. What? Red letters, this is Jesus? Are you kidding? His response seems stern. It actually plays off a common slur. Jews would call Gentiles dogs, and they didn't mean it in a positive way. But again, Jesus is not just saying something, he's actually setting up this learning environment, this teaching for his friends, his followers. He's actually using harsh language. And some would say part of what he's doing is actually making explicit what is implicit. In other words, the prejudice, the annoyance, the things that his disciples are thinking, he says, we can say that out loud, that's okay. Here's what you're thinking. And again, he's going to actually, it's masterful. He's going to both respond to her and teach them at the same time because he's Jesus. He gives voice to what they've been thinking and feeling privately. He's going to actually set up this conversation where this woman can actually prevail in this argument with Jesus in a beautiful way because he wants her to prevail. And he wants to respond, he wants to teach them. And so in answer to it's not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs, she wittily, with a twinkle, not how dare you, says, yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. Some of this really is lost in translation. Linguistically, culturally, there's a lot going on here. There's different Greek words being used that are all translated dogs. That's worth knowing. And she actually takes his word for dog, switches to another word that's more akin to puppies. For a first century Jew, dogs were unclean. They would run around in packs, and they would often eat, they'd be like vultures, right? They were the janitor system of the first century in that way. They're unclean. Roman households, Greek households, they love dogs. The Romans, they would keep dogs as watchdogs. There's all kinds of mosaics and artwork you can see of this. The Greeks were even more. They were like, we're Athens, right? We love dogs. I mean, you walk around town, you're like, I see that you worship an unknown deity, the dog. Like, they're everywhere. That's pretty Greek. The Greeks were like that. Some of you might have seen the Odyssey, right, in the theaters recently. And there's this scene where you have this dog, Argos. It's the hunting dog of Odysseus. He had fed this dog as a puppy, maybe with crumbs from his table. He had trained it up and then he had went away to war. And if you remember, the dog is just waiting, pining for his master to come home. That's the kind of connection that they had to dogs in the Greek world. By the way, Odysseus does come home and he's somewhat disguised. The dog discerns it, wags its tail, and then expires. It's actually like Simeon waiting in the temple for the Lord to come. It's beautiful. And at first when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is fan service for Americans, making the puppy the hero. No, this is in the Odyssey from Homer. And so they're playing with these ideas of how we think about dogs, and they love dogs here in Syrophoenicia. And so she uses that word for puppies. And by the way, Jesus is already taking a step towards her when he says, you won't take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs under the table, because Jews wouldn't have dogs under the table. They would have kept them far outside. When he says we're going to throw the crumbs to the dogs under the table, the disciples are like, wait a minute, why are they in the house? They don't know how to act. Why do we let them in? And Jesus is talking about feeding them. She said, yes, Lord, yet even the puppies eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. Her humility, her faith, her persistence are incredible, and Jesus is delighted. It's interesting because it's like she understands what he's doing, and there's this banter that's actually playful and beautiful in their exchange. And she understands that, yeah, God is going to work through Israel to bless the nations, but I'm here and I need you, and my daughter is unwell. Bishop N.T. Wright says that this woman's faith broke through time, broke through the waiting period. Because they're waiting for when Jesus would come to Jerusalem as Israel's Messiah and be killed and be raised from the dead and send the Spirit to then go out to bless the nations. His followers, his friends, the disciples, they're not even ready for Good Friday. They're not ready for the cross yet. They're not ready for Calvary. This woman is calling for Easter. She's calling for Pentecost. She's calling for the nations. And so Jesus will exalt her. In the last verse, look at that beautiful exaltation. Then Jesus answered her, "O woman, great is your faith. Be it done for you as you desire." And her daughter was healed instantly. Jesus will praise and commend her for her faith, her tenacity. We get a sense there of, in this confusing passage, of just how beautiful the gospel emerges. How you see the beauty and mercy and grace of Jesus on display. Her daughter is healed. She stands then as the mother of the Gentiles, of all those who are in need of love and forgiveness and healing. And think about all that flows, the lessons of this passage. I mean, first from her, we get a sense of how should we approach Jesus. Hebrews says, let us boldly approach the throne of grace to find mercy and help in time of need. This woman comes boldly to the Lord, makes her request known, doesn't demand anything, doesn't feel entitled really to anything, makes her request known and then trusts, Lord, you do what's best. That's a pattern we can follow. Make our request known and trust the Lord to do what is best. And think about it, from this passage, we see how Jesus responds with love and delight and care and blessing. We see, how should we come to him? How should we welcome others? I mean, think about all the folks who you might come to mind, whether it's the crowd of 5,000 or this too loud woman or the kids that are just boisterous. And you would go, man, they're getting in my way of my spiritual moment. They don't understand what's going on here. They don't get the scripts. How do we respond to people like that? Jesus says, bring them in. Welcome them. I long to spend time with them and pray for them and bless them. It's interesting, this passage, it's about crumbs, right? Crumbs. It's sandwiched between two miracles of bread. You have the feeding of the 5,000 plus, where Jesus, the bread of life, gives bread overflowing with bounty and generosity. You get Jesus feeding 4,000 plus Gentiles even. And that overflows and goes forth even more abundantly. And then this is right in the middle, saying, as I pour out bread for the world, there's going to be crumbs that will satisfy even you. and even me, and even those who we know and love. One last thing, we're almost done. There's a Walter Wink. Anyone know the name Walter Wink? He's actually done kind of a study of Jesus as a teacher, his pedagogical methods, if you will. And he said what Jesus is an expert in, and we don't always love this, but he's an expert in deliberately induced frustration as a way to teach and train his followers. Deliberately induced frustration. We've actually seen that over several weeks. When you had this abundance, this crowd that was so hungry, and the disciples said, send them away, what's Jesus say? Feed them. Like, we don't know how to do that. Feed them. Okay, fine, what do you have? I'll make it work. Deliberately induced frustration. Right after that, what's he do? Hey, get in the boat. Go right into the storm where you can't do anything. And you're going to say that you need me to meet you on the water. Deliberately induced frustration. Time and time again, when the disciples see problems, a hungry crowd, a too loud woman, unruly children, send them away, send her away, don't bother Jesus. There's a different sending happening because Jesus is welcoming them in. He's welcoming us in. And then by the end of Matthew's gospel, he's sending, but he's not sending them away. He's sending away those he's welcomed. He's sending them away on mission. I mean, you might know that the end of this gospel is about the work that he has given us to do, and that they actually do. God bless them. They finally get it right. It says, this is Matthew, the end of Matthew's gospel, said, Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always till the end of the age. Act like you've been there before. The entire book of Acts will turn that on its head as the church fulfills this commission. As these men and women who are totally confused go to places they never thought they'd end up. And they see people respond to the good news of the gospel in ways they could never imagine. And this episode here, this Canaanite woman, bless her, is just this foretaste, this icon of God's hospitality and welcome and mission. And we are called to actually find ourselves received by Jesus and then sent out to those in need. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.